I think important to talk about your day on 9/11. You were coming in the car when the first tower was hit, right?
9/11 happened, and all of us remember where we were in 9/11. I had invited in, I wanted to do something, you know, if anybody knows me, knows that I can't stand not to be doing something and making changes. And in this country, we average 36,000 Americans die every year from the flu. Last year was 70,000. And so I decided one of my causes, like I did welfare and economic development, that when I was governor, was to come up with a ubiquitous vaccine for flu. And I had invited scientists in from all over, and they were coming on 9/11. Several of them were there. We're going to have a day-long seminar of the best scientists and virologists that we could come up with to be able to come up with a vaccine. And I was given a speech in the morning, and the first thing I heard coming in was the first, at 8:46, the first plane hit the tower. And then 16 minutes later, the second one. By this time, I was in my office, and I called in. I knew something was really bad because it was beautiful out, sun out, and everything was like this. And so I called in my lawyers, and I says, and the president was in Florida, the vice president was down in some bunker because everybody thought we were going to be under attack. And so I knew I had to be in charge. I knew that there were a lot of people that are going to be injured, and somebody had to take care of them. So I called in my lawyers, and I don't know, it's never been done before, and I don't even know if I had the authority to do it. I called my lawyers in, and I says, I want to declare a national health emergency. And so he said, I don't know if we can do it. I said, don't tell me I can't do it. Just figure out how to do it and get back here. And this was 9:16. I said, you got 45 minutes. At 10 o'clock, I declared a health emergency. And we were the last ones to get a plane in the air. Remember, all the planes were grounded? I got a plane in the air. There are 8 medical depots around America that are top secret that got tons of medical supplies. And the closest one to New York, we sent the plane up there, filled up the plane with medical supplies and flew it to New York. And we had it there by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The only one outside of the Air Force that got a plane in the air for us to fly up and get medical supplies to New York. We had kits, medicines, we had masks, gloves, everything like this. And we got it up there to be unloaded. And so the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was out in front of the Humphrey building shaking hands with any of the, you got to imagine everybody was really afraid because the plane coming from that was going to hit the Capitol that went into the things in Pennsylvania would have gone right by the Humphrey building. So they were rightly so very upset. I said, I'm going to be here, and if you're not afraid, come on in. He said, well, I'm afraid, but I'm coming in. So I stood there and shook hands with every one of my employees at 5 o'clock in the morning, welcoming them, and then I made it up to New York, the first secretary to go there 2 days before Bush got up there. I was up there walking down the streets of New York and going out to see the hospital, meeting the individuals that were injured, and those individuals. And then one of the worst things I've ever done in my life is I went down to the morgue that afternoon after 9/11, and you can imagine the poor people were trying to find their loved ones. They were bringing in hairbrushes, and I went in there to thank the good doctors. Some had worked for me. And they were having fragments of bodies, you know, trying to get DNA, and it was just so utterly impossible to believe that took place. But
James, we're listening. You're on Book TV.
Hi, Governor. I was wondering if you could tell a story or an anecdote about your time with the Global Fund in Geneva.
Oh, absolutely. The Global Fund, to me, is one of my biggest accomplishments, and it's going to probably pay bigger dividends worldwide than anything else I've ever done. Kofi Annan called me up, and first off, he called Colin Powell and said he would like to come down and talk to some people about setting up a fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And Colin Powell called me, and I said, absolutely. So Kofi Annan from the UN Secretary came down and met with Colin Powell and myself, and then we went over and we talked to President George W. Bush. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and we convinced the president to put some money into the Global Fund. I think it was $100 million. And the Global Fund started with that conversation, and we raised $100 million from the United States to start the Global Fund. And since then, I became the president of the Global Fund, and we raised $5 billion. Now it's up to $8 billion, but it's probably the best international fund to help people and give people hope to reduce HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And I am absolutely overjoyed with the successes it's had, and I am very happy and appreciative of the small part that I was able to play in setting up the Global Fund and getting it started. And when I've been to Africa several times as chairman of the Global Fund, and it's amazing the countries in Africa that absolutely are so impressed and love the United States because of the Global Fund. Getting HIV, antiretroviral viruses, medication to them. I could tell you a beautiful story, but it'd take too long, of having one of my daughters, Tommy, go with me to Africa and meeting a woman with 9 children. And she cried and said, you know, the nice thing about what the United States has done and what you individuals are doing in the Global Fund is getting me antiretroviral virus medication, and I'm going to live long enough to see my children graduate from school and not become part of the 20-some million orphanages around Africa. And that was just so moving and so poignant of what the America has been able to accomplish. It's a great story.
Great story. You were on point for Medicare Part D.
Yes.
But it was a brutal fight on the House floor, and there was a story you told at the end where you were like 1 vote short, and Trent Franks, a Republican from Arizona, it's 4 in the morning, and he wants to talk to who?
The President of the United States. I needed his vote, and we needed his vote to have the 217 votes to carry Part D. And Part D, as you all know, was my idea, and my department came up with, even though George Bush gets the credit for it, it was really Tommy Thompson. So when you get your Part D, just remember, thank me. But we put it together, and we were having a tough time getting it passed. And Speaker Hastridge called me over and he says, Trent Franks, this is at 4 o'clock in the morning. The President Bush, to his credit, was wonderful. He came in from England. He had just been over to London, and I think to see the Queen, if I remember correctly. And he had just landed the night before and was tired, as you can well imagine. And so I have this individual congressman. There were 2 from Arizona, and they wanted to weigh in on who the president was going to appoint as federal judge in Arizona. And I called over one of the president's individuals, and I said, you got to call the president. And so I could talk to him, and he's got to reassure these 2 congressmen that he's going to appoint a conservative judge in Arizona, or they won't vote for Part D. And he said, you want me to call the president at 4 o'clock in the morning? And I said, yes. And so the president gets on, not happy. You can well imagine. They woke him up, and I said, Mr. President, we have a situation. We have 2 individuals. They may vote for Part D, and we need it in order to pass it. And if they get some reassurance from you that you will appoint a conservative. So he said, put them on. So they got on the phone, and he said, yeah, sure. What do you want? They talked for probably 15 minutes. And afterwards, I don't know. I was not on the phone, so I don't exactly know what he said. But after it was all over, he said, Trent Franks and the other congressmen said they would vote for it. And so we called the floor, and this is after we had kept the roll open the longest I think it had ever been open. from about 1:30 in the morning to about 4:30 in the morning. They voted, and at 4:30 it passed, and by that time there was 2 other individuals. So we ended up with 219 votes, and we only needed 217. And so it passed, and that was the beginning of Part D, which has turned out to be one of the most popular programs in Medicare today. Everybody loves it, and it's worked out very well. Very effective program.
Barbara in Atlanta, we have 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, real quickly. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I wondered what you think we should be doing to Medicare today to try to make it sustainable for the seniors coming on down the pike in record numbers.
That's, if I knew that answer, I would be President of the United States today instead of just being an individual friend of Doug Moe's. Medicare is a very complex subject, and I think we did a great job in Part D. And I think what we need to do is something that I've asked people to do for a long time, and I wished I was empowered to do it. I would like to get the best thinking Democrats and the best thinking Republicans to sit down and take a look at Medicare and leave your party agendas at the doorstep and go in and say, what can we accomplish together? If we don't do that, we're going to end up, because if the Republicans come up with an idea, just like Obama came up with Obamacare, and there were no Republicans supported it, and as soon as Republicans got in power, they tried to dismantle it. If you look back in history, all the great achievements, it's always been done on a bipartisan basis. Medicaid, Social Security, workers' compensation, unemployment compensation, Medicare and Medicaid, all done on a bipartisan basis. And that's why, in order to achieve what you want and what I want, is to make Medicare solvent for years to come for everybody, we have to sit down and we have to come together on a bipartisan basis. What that solution is, I can't tell you at this point in time, but I know it's there.